Hi, and welcome to our third episode of Impact TV. Impact TV, a Publicis Sapient and Constellation Research joint initiative, is the sixth episode limited series focused on tech as a force for good and its positive impact on business and people. In today's episode, we'll probe into the topic of unleashing human potential in a data driven and AI world. We'll explore how data and AI are powerful tools for augmenting human creativity, offering new insights, inspiration, and boundless possibilities. Our distinguished panel of industry experts and thought leaders will share their experiences and perspectives on leveraging data and AI to nurture human potential by sharing real world examples and how data driven AI has revolutionized industries and empowered people to push the boundaries of innovation. Joining me in this illuminating discussion are three of our industry guests and my co host, Ray Wang. Hi, Ray. Ray is the chairman, founder, and principal analyst of Constellation Research.
Hey, thanks a lot. And I'm here with Teresa Barreira. She is the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at the leading global digital consultancy, Publicis Sapient. Her creative thinking, coupled with her 25 years of global B2B marketing expertise, has enabled her to break the mold of traditional marketing for technology and service companies. But we also have three amazing guests, and I'm going to ask them to quickly introduce themselves as we go along the way. So, Ray, Valez, go ahead. Tell us a little about yourself.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, sure. Great. Thanks for having us today. Really excited to chat. I'm Ray Valez, Chief Technology Officer at Publicis Sapient. I focus on bringing together a lot of the different parts of Publicis Group to help create the solutions that operate at that intersection of data and technology.
Very cool. JoAnn Stonier, you've got a brand new title. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ray, and nice to meet you, Teresa, and thanks for having me. Yes, I have a brand new minted title. I am the new Mastercard Fellow of Data and AI, formerly their Chief Data Officer, and before that, the Chief Privacy Officer. But in my new role, I get to really focus on the dialogue that we're having, both on this topic and others, as the world is rapidly changing thanks to the introduction of generative AI, quantum computing, and other emerging technologies. So happy to be here today.
We're so happy to have you here. And then, of course, Rishad Tobaccowala, welcome to the show. Tell us a little about yourself.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm Rishad Tobaccowala. Today, I am a speaker, an advisor, and an author. I've written a book called Restoring the Soul of Business, Staying Human in the Age of Data, which is probably why I've been invited to this. And I'm also writing another book called Rethinking Work. Prior to this second career, I was the Chief Strategist and Growth Officer at Publicis, where I spent 37 years, including working with Ray all over the world.
That's amazing. Great to have you guys back together. So, well, good. Well, we're going to start with the interview with Ray, and then we're going to go on to JoAnn, and then, of course, we'll go to Rishad. So let's start the show. Well, welcome, Ray. Great name.
Yes. Same here, Ray.
So we're excited to have you. As a passionate technologist, one of the interesting things that we talk about is really about where the future is, right? And for you, technology and data have been changing and transforming all these different industries. What opportunities are you seeing now differently through that lens for innovation and growth?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And as I'm sure we'll talk a lot about today, is just over the last 6 to 12 months, there have been tremendous changes in how we can help our teams and our clients deliver on new experiences and business growth. And so clearly there's this new trend, and I think an easy way to think about it is we're now able to empower our teams with new superpowers. So as a technologist bringing together data and technology to help our teams and our clients, we're starting to see an everyday activity where people are turning to technologies like generative AI to augment the way they deliver. And so that could be leveraging a technology like Copilot to improve productivity, efficiency, quality, security of the code I'm writing. It could be a technology like what OpenAI and ChatGPT bring to help drive synthesis and understanding for complex topics. I know I use that all the time. Let me upload a white paper and give me the summary, and I'll go back and read it later, hopefully, or at least that's the theory. But all of that is incredibly powerful. So you think about that intersection, that's super exciting. And I think, I haven't been fortunate enough to work in such a fast-changing industry. I think that's amazing. So that's one big pillar. And then the other big pillar is how we can take these experiences that have been so rooted in browsers and apps and really break out of that. And so what you're starting to see every day is making experiences much more conversational. And that applies to everything. That applies to a conversational experience that could be commerce enabled, a conversational experience that could be contact center enabled. All of these interactions are going to be much more natural for us as humans, given we're so strongly rooted in conversations.
Right. You were talking about generative AI, and there's a lot of excitement right now in the market. But there's also fear.
Mm-hmm.
Does it excite you or does it fear you? And I'm curious also, all the work you've been doing with clients, what do you really see the value? We talk all about the application of it, and everybody's experimenting, but what do you see really the valuables?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so I guess I'll start with, what are the concerns that we have? And I think what's really fascinating about these foundational large language models is they have massive they're going through and ingesting just massive amounts of content from all these different places. And there's a lot of great studies and white papers that talk about the different places where they're ingesting data. But then that training in that data makes it very difficult to get back to, well, what was the origin of this piece of content, right? And so I do think caution is super appropriate in this case, especially if whether you're generating text or you're generating visual experiences, right? So we've seen some of our partners like Adobe come out with offerings that will indemnify their product. So if you use the visual creation technologies that Adobe has to offer, they're going to ensure that everything you're using to generate new content from is copyright safe, as an example. So I do think having caution and being aware of the fact that there's really too much data that is going into creating these outputs. How do you ensure that it is brand safe and aligned with your brand principles? So I do think, I mean, I'm more excited than I am afraid, but I think caution is warranted.
That's great.
That's great. That's a great point, right? And one of the things that, you're right with Adobe, right? You use Adobe Stock, Adobe Firefly. It's within the network. You can definitely, take care of what's going on. We just saw at the White House recently got some voluntary commitments on watermarking content that was created by AI. What are some principles around responsible AI that you see that are going to be important, that you feel is going to be things that organizations should be thinking about, those ethical implications that they should be considering?
Yep. And so two things I think there, and I'll talk about a responsible AI approach. One is this technology that Gen AI is created and providing our teams and our experiences is powerful enough that it's going to make us reassess the way we were approaching responsible AI. And I'll use language like responsible machine learning in the past, and I think that's going to unlock opportunities where in the past I think industries and organizations within highly regulated industries have stayed away from leveraging data for better experiences or better enterprise outputs, and so that's a positive thing. It's just too powerful, obvious, and true that you're going to start to build in a deeper sense of responsible AI. And I think there's two key principles when you think about that, anchoring in machine learning. One is, what are the protected attributes, right? Because one of the easiest ways to think about machine learning, if you think about an old database structure, you select data from a source system, and you say where this value equals this, right? And in that value part, you've got attributes that you may or want to protect that align with your brand values, or regulatory wise, you have to protect. And so that's super important. So that could be, I'll just use the zip code example. Maybe zip code is a protected attribute. I want to make sure my generative AI models, my machine learning models, my customer lifetime value models, like everything that helps make a prediction or a decision for my business doesn't use zip code. And that's harder in Gen AI, but also it's not as common in even just legacy machine learning based approaches. So I think that's really critical. And then the other thing too is machine learning is really tricky, right? So if you want to build an outcome that you train a model on, it may find a proxy for zip code, right? And so it could be in certain geographies, these 15 attributes are good enough to tell you somebody lives in a zip code, right? So you also have to ensure that your models aren't finding a way around your protected attributes. So I think those are really critical to responsible AI. And you need to step back. There's a little bit of philosophy here too. What are the attributes I want to protect? I'm not just going to wait for the government to tell me I can't use zip code. I'm making that deliberate decision because it aligns with my brand values.
Wait, there's zip code bias. How are we going to handle that?
Right, exactly, right. And so Cathy O'Neill wrote an amazing book called Weapons of Math, M-A-T-H, Destruction.
Yep, Weapons of
I
Math.
highly recommend it. It's a fantastic read. She came out with that a couple of years ago, and I think it continues to drive even greater and greater importance. And so even though she's a math professor, she helps to look at the full impact of data and how you can treat it responsibly and use it for a power of good. But you have to think about your approach, your principles, and how do you apply that even beyond just zip code, especially with all the changes in our legal environment and all of those impacts. Maybe the government hasn't told me this is protected, but I want to ensure that I'm taking that into my principles.
And what is the consumer role in that decision?
Right. Well, and so I think if you go back to, I think it was 2017, 2018 when the GDPR went into effect, the general theme was the right to be forgotten. Right. And so ensuring that the enterprise gives you that capability, right? And that's the legal premise across GDPR and CCPA and a lot of the other capabilities. So that gives the consumer the power, right? And I think that's the critical element here is this a brand I trust? Do I want to share my data with them? Or do I not trust that? And so continuing to make that easier and easier, I think that needs to be a principle built into the way our enterprises work. But then consumers need to know they have that power, right? If you don't want to share your data or you don't trust a particular brand,
yes, no, yeah, absolutely.
Make sure that you communicate that.
Yeah, I think it's really important.
And fortunately, we're on that route.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Teresa.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's really, really important because we should learn something from the past, and shame on us if we don't. So I think the consumer do have to be empowered in this decision. But I wanted to change the topic, not change topics, but continue the conversation and ask you, you talk a lot about in your role about digital transformation, and AI and data plays a big role in that. But I personally believe that transformation is done by people and for people. Even what we're just talking about, who's making these decisions? There are people that are making the decisions, not the technology. Yeah. And I believe that technology is just an enabler. Do you feel the same about data? And does data play the same role in enabling transformation?
I think so. And I think what has held back oftentimes in the past data-driven transformation is the ability to find that right balance between human decision-making and data-driven decision-making, right? And so in the industry, we've been talking for decades and decades around personalization. And I think one of the challenges to doing personalization well is the ability to confidently federate the decision for that next best experience recommendation, the next best creative, the next best visual identity to an algorithm, right? And we haven't been able to, and I think the responsible AI piece feeds into this very strongly. We haven't necessarily been able to find the way that the organization can trust that the model and the output of that model is making the right decision. And that lines up with the human in the loop, because when you do experimentation design well, the algorithm presents various different experiences to end users, and then it makes the decision on the most successful experience. And so how do you change your organization to both empower the humans with that knowledge, but then trust the algorithm is going to find the right decision?
Darn hallucinations. How do we end up there? But hey, real quick, we got about 30 seconds. It seems clean room technologies are taking off. So over the last 6 months. So talk a little bit about them, because most people don't know what a clean room is. And then talk about how it's improving outcomes and collaboration.
Yeah. And that's exactly, I think clean rooms are privacy protected, legally compliant ways that you can connect the data without exposing personal information. Right. And so hopefully that is clear.
We're
what that means
is a lot more of those definitely coming through. So
yeah, for sure. And over the last 6 months, there's been massive announcements by large cloud players. And this is happening in such a way that you don't have to move your data anymore either. So you can create a collaboration between brand A and brand B, bring those two different data sets together, and then run a campaign. And so you've seen this in, airlines connecting with Starbucks to improve loyalty outcomes, right? And so you could say, I'm traveling today, right? Ray, you just came back from Tel Aviv, and you get a coffee. Does that help boost my my loyalty points with the airline provider? And how can I bring those two together to drive?
I triple dipped on miles. Don't tell anybody, okay?
Exactly. And so then, now I'm collaborating, right? So that's a collaboration so that brands don't have to live in isolation anymore to drive better experiences or better choices that they want to create in terms of offers for their customers, right? Because now I can bring those two data sets together, collaborate on an always-on basis, but still protect the personal identifiable information.
Wow, so much information.
Yeah, we're here with Ray Valez, EVP of Data and AI at Publicis Sapient. Thank you so much for being on. Wow, we're going to bring on someone even more interesting.
Our next guest.
And our next guest. It's only getting more interesting. Each guest, every guest is amazing. We've got JoAnn Stonier, Fellow of Data and AI at Mastercard. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah. Welcome. Let me start, JoAnn, by asking you have a really extensive experience in data and privacy, and you have worked in various global brands. And in doing that, you have witnessed the evolution of the chief data officer role over the years. And sitting in this role now and looking back, is this role expanding? Is it continue to expand? And do you think it'll change as more companies now adopt generative AI?
So it's a great question, and thank you. I think the Chief Data Officer role is still a relatively young executive role in the grand scheme of things. And so, especially when you compare them to other roles like the CTO role or the CIO role. And it's one I think that has evolved since its early days, when it was created mostly by financial services firm as a data governance role, as a way to do an awful lot of compliance back in around 2008, 2009. I think now it's much more of a product-facing role. It's you'll see the title has evolved into Chief Data and Analytic Officer roles, right? And so I think that what you're seeing is that data now is understood to be an element that is needed as the raw material of innovation, right? And with generative AI and AI in general, I think what you're seeing is that the data officer role is right in the midst of that, that you need somebody that's focused on data as a separate type of asset that has both, as you were talking earlier, positives for innovation, but also some flat sides that need to be handled and thought through, right? So you need some executive to understand the data profile of the organization, especially if they have a rich profile of data that they're going to use for innovation, but also if they're going to be partnering and are part of a data ecosystem, they also need to understand what are their responsibilities relative to their customers, to their vendors, to their partners. And so I think you will still see this role, but I think it will continue to evolve for sure.
You know, I love saying this title as the Mastercard Fellow of Data and AI. You share a lot of insights into how, I want to know how you and your team have actually built a data strategy and put practices around ethics, diversity, innovation. These are areas that you've been pioneering along with all your expertise before on privacy.
Yeah, I think, it's always been important to us that our data strategy aligned with our business strategy, right? And then I think we understood from very early days that data was just one element of executing our business strategy. So if you think of your people strategy, your financial strategy, your technology strategy, data is just another element of how do you get to achieve the results that you want. And so when you think about data in that way, then it means you have to be responsible with it. And you have to think about data as outcomes based. And so then I think when you get to the ethical piece and the responsible piece, I think the way that we've always designed is thinking about, well, our customers, right? And even though we're a B2B company, we're really a B2C brand. And so we think all the time about the individuals that are going to use our products and solutions. So while we've always had a commitment to security and then privacy, I think we also began to recognize that we needed a commitment to data itself and how we were going to use it. And back at the end of 2018, we announced responsible data principles that were going to help guide our organization on how to design with data so that we made sure we were all on the same page. And so, yes, privacy, security, accountability. And we started talking very early about things like integrity in our data analytics practices. What were those going to look like? And we included in there things like bias testing and A/B testing and all the things that we talk about now. But I think it was really, really important that we were doing that early so that later on we added a principle around inclusion, which I think has really helped us focus on what's important when you talk about outcomes that are really going to be equitable when you look across the globe at products and solutions. So, and trust me, all those conversations are only heated up even further by generative AI.
Yeah, aligning data to outcomes and then aligning the data to business strategy, that's really important. And I think sometimes companies forget that. But you also have consistently emphasized the importance of data in relation to people and its profound impact in their lives. And I feel that we probably have seen both the good and the bad. And so could you elaborate, JoAnn, on that? What does that mean? And what are the implications it holds specifically now the data as now the new oil?
So remember, I started out as the privacy officer, right? And so I was charged with kind of protecting the rights of the individual. And so if you think about it that way, right, data represents us. It represents people, what we're tracking, all the data that we collect, and we collect more and more of it every day, right? It represents us, even in its most anonymized form. It represents activities. It represents how people interact with each other, how ecosystems operate, how entities interact with each other, right? All of that, though, boiling it down, what we care about is each other, right? Organizations serve their consumers, serve different types of individuals, serve different types of entities. But Teresa, you mentioned it at the top. We're really all about people, right? This is very human-centered, our world. And so if you can remember that ultimately every product, every solution is going to be used at the service of a person, and they're going to be perceiving that product. They're going to be handling it. They're going to be touching it. They're going to be using it in some way, whether that's virtual or physical. Well, then if you design that way and you think about the data in that way, it makes you answer all of the questions that I think regulators care about, that your customers care about, that individuals care about, in a way that just brings everything to life. So even though we're, right? So it just makes more sense to us to think about the individual at the very beginning and incorporate that into our design process. I was at a conference just last week and somebody asked about this, and they asked us if we had a group dedicated to human-centered design. And I think they were surprised when I said, no, because everybody thinks this way at Mastercard.
That's amazing. And you're oh, go ahead, Teresa. Sorry, you're saying.
Oh, no, I think that's amazing way of thinking, because I fundamentally believe that, sometimes we hear a lot about the negativity of technology, but when we actually use technology or data and we use it to design solutions that are focused on people, are people-centric, as JoAnn is saying, I think everybody can benefit. So
Yeah,
I'm
no, definitely.
really great to see that that's the way they think about it.
No, I definitely agree. And one of the things, JoAnn, that's been your ethos for quite some time, right? You've always taken a approach that's been human centric, that's been responsible in terms of responsible AI. You should bring you to Shack 15 with me in the next few days. Like there's a big conversation about this, but this is huge, right? This era of data-driven AI is something where we're going to see continued issues in terms of what's the correlation between data and AI. What does it mean in terms of that role and impact going forward? What are some of your thoughts there? What do you see that future?
Yeah, I think we're at a really interesting point in time right now, right? So we're seeing all the large language models that have been released, right, into the public mind. And so what we're seeing right now is we don't know exactly how those models were built. However, we do know that they were built on public data. Okay, great.
Yes.
Except that the public data also shows our society for some of the flat sides that it has, right? And because those data sets were not curated for all the intended purposes that we're putting that to. Plus, they were built on North America. They were built in English language, which is notoriously imprecise, right? And we're seeing some of those results in those foundational models that are maybe not so good, right? We talk about hallucinations. We talk about the model is generative, right? So it's trying to put in those footnotes and references that it knows should be there. And if they're not there, well, I'll just make something up because I know something should be there, right? Well, it makes sense to the model, right? It makes perfect sense to the model that it's generating what it thinks should be there. But it may not be right for the outcomes. And especially for organizations who are going to build and use their operational models, which they understand their data, they've curated their data, they understand the flat sides of their data. But the challenge is, how are these things going to operate together, right? And how are we going to derive in this next generation the benefits of large language models and generative AI in tandem with operational models, and understand the data? And so what we're trying to do is understand that we have to have more distance, the more sensitive the outcome is, the more impactful it is on an individual, whether that's a fraud algorithm, credit models, right? All of those things are super important. If you're just looking for the train schedule, well, maybe the inaccuracy is going to be an inconvenience, right? But maybe it's not as long lasting as something else, right? Health information, etc. So I think we're in for a time when, as a society, we have to be very thoughtful now that we're using unfettered data to inform an awful lot of decisions. We, as those who understand the science and are building the science, we need to be very thoughtful now in the governance, the curation, and in how we're actually designing this methodology. Because now these connected ecosystems and how we're thinking it through is more and more important. That's, I think, the next generation of responsibility for all of us.
Talking about science, I have a question about talent. I have two young sons, just one is entering college, the other one is in college. So thinking about talent and the work in the future interests me. And when you think about the crucial skills and expertise required for individuals and teams to work with data and AI, we often think about the science. But I'd love to get your perspective. Are those skills evolving? Meaning, do we need for the future not only science, but do we also need like liberal arts?
I love the question. I absolutely love the question because I get this question all the time. And I wish I had a crystal ball. I've always wished I'd had a crystal ball for almost all my jobs, right? So I could predict the future, Teresa. But here's what I think. I think science is going to still remain super important. One of my nieces is studying for her doctorate, and she's studying quantum dots. And she's amazing. it's in physics, right? And it's the material that actually will enable even more supercomputing at some point in the future, right? So science, I think, is still extraordinarily important to our world. But I also think liberal arts, and I think even design thinking is going to be equally important, as is philosophy and how we think through some of the challenges, right? We hear about prompt engineering right now. And if you think about that, those folks are cleaning up our imprecise language, right? If they're trying to make precise our queries so that we get the results we want. Now, I don't think we're going to have forever careers in prompt engineering, right? But I think though the skills, those baseline skills of designing and thinking through a design life cycle and being willing to try again and not think of an outcome that's maybe negative as a failure, but just as a learning moment is going to be super important. Plus, I think that the world of technology, everybody is going to need to understand tech and data and how it interacts in our world. Regulators are going to need, and politicians and governments and civil society are going to need to increase their skills in order to operate in this interconnected world. The clean rooms, right, that we're going to have to operate data that are in many regulations. Well, regulator teams are going to need to understand what's being placed in there so they can understand how companies and other organizations are innovating. All of those skills require then the combination of legal, engineering, technology, science. So I think we're in for combinations of skill sets in ways that we haven't always put them together yet, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think we have to engage our teachers in this, especially as well. So look out for new ways of thinking
I love
about
that you said philosophy. I tell my kids all the time, take a philosophy class.
Yeah.
Expand your mind.
Yeah, no, we're definitely going to see those play a role. And when we think about what's going on, right, that right brain, left brain formation of digital artisans being able to handle both types of work is going to be very important going forward. We got a few seconds. Ask you a quick question really about ROI. We're talking about data-driven initiatives and AI and hard science. How do we actually quantify ROI? Any specific methodologies, frameworks you might want to suggest?
So, I think we're in an interesting moment. I think that a lot of organizations up to generative AI, we're getting quite good at looking at the impact, efficiency, as well as new products we're having on their bottom line, on a return on investment. I think now what we're seeing, at least in private industry, that generative AI is still, the early use cases are for operating efficiency while we look at how are we going to modify our products and solutions and what will happen? We haven't really released them yet, right? I think everybody's looking at what's the disruption moment? How are we going to do this safely, securely? That distance concept that I talked about, making sure we get it right before we change any outcomes, right? But what I do think is going to be important, that we're going to measure efficiency, effectiveness, right? What are we doing? And then what's the impact on people? And what I have seen is quite a lot of tools now being developed to measure where's your data? How are you going to be able to document what you're doing with the data alongside of your innovation so that you can have that kind of compliance moment that's coming with the AI Act in Europe and others, so that you can actually see what you're doing, document it at the same time as you make changes. I think those type of tools are also going to be very effective in developing the next generation of ROI. So I'm excited to see these metrics and AI now generating tools to help us with ROI. So stay tuned. There's a lot coming in this space, right?
We're here with JoAnn Stonier, Mastercard Fellow and former Chief Data Officer. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us.
Yeah, thank you. This was fantastic. I learned so much.
Who do we have up next? Look at this. Another special guest. So thank you so much for joining us. Very, very cool. We have
Thank
Rishad.
you for inviting me.
Rishad, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you here. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of your thought leadership, big fan of your podcast. And you had an amazing and brilliant and successful career. You have seen some significant evolutions within business and society at large. They've been taking a place, and you've talked about these changes as an era of the great reinvention.
Yes.
And I'd love to hear from you. How is this different from anything that we've seen in the past?
Well, I think the difference between now and the past is really three big things. The first is you are seeing technology accelerate, and many new technologies are what I call the third connected age. So if we thought about search and e-commerce as the first one, and then we had mobile and social and streaming in the second one, we now have all of those, but we also have AI, blockchain, metaverses, and 5G. At the very same time, both we are all connected, billions of us, and the level of chip manufacturing and technology has reached a particular high level. So as a result of all of these, we basically are likely to see more change occur over the next 10 years, requiring all of us, both personally and as businesses, to reinvent than ever before.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? And that shift is happening, and that's tied back to something else. I mean, you're on top of all these great topics, right? I mean, I was just reading your 5 keys to professional relevance, right? You've written a book, Restoring the Soul of Business. Staying human in the age of data, right? I mean, humanizing technology and humanizing, putting humanity back into technology is something huge. How do we balance that human intuition and that need for precision and accuracy on data-driven insights? Like, the machine tells us, and I'll give you the example, right? Captain Scully, he's got a few seconds to figure out he's going to land the plane on the Hudson. Everyone's telling him no, he does it, right? But, that's a human intuition. If AI was in charge, it probably was like, cost benefit analysis. Yeah, probably don't want to do that. But guess what? There was this period in time when humans actually had intuition and someone took a shot. So how do you balance that between that human intuition and data-driven insights?
Well, I think the big thing is to recognize you need both. So the original title of my book, and anyone who's read my book will see this line coming in again and again, or this phrase called the story and the spreadsheet, right? Which is you have to combine story and spreadsheet. Now, the spreadsheet is the math and the data, which continues to be extremely important. And as we've heard from previous guests, continues to accelerate, and you will need that. And whether we call data oil or we call it the refining of the oil, but that's increasingly important. On the other hand, all of that is driven by what I call data-driven digital silicon objects. But all of us are analog carbon-based feeling people. And we actually get motivated by stories. Currency is a story. Religion is a story, right? We fight over stories because we are feeling human beings, and we choose with our hearts, then we use the data to select or confirm what we just wanted. So how do you combine that is really the big part of the future that we're sort of living in. And in this AI age, I basically say what we have to do is we have to embrace, adapt, and complement. We have to embrace AI for the reasons that we've all spoken about. On the other hand, we have to adapt what we do in our organizations. But as importantly, we need to complement the machines with what we humans are naturally good at, whether they be creative or storytelling or other kinds of things. And so the idea really is embrace, adapt, and complement in order to remain human in this particular age.
Wow. Yeah, the story, we don't talk about it enough about that. Story is so important because data without story is just data. That story, it's really important that you said that we have to remember that. Yeah. We talked a lot here today about data, AI, technology. And I believe, I have this saying, I often say that the more digital we become, the more human we need to be.
Yes.
As we enter the age of generative AI, do you feel the same applies to creativity, meaning the more we use generative AI, the more creative humans have to be? And I would love to hear your perspective. And also, what do you think are the most important implications for creativity and story in this new era? Will creativity and ingenuity, will it be elevated or be diminished?
It will actually enhance and expand, and it'll enhance and expand for 3 reasons. The first is you and I will have tools that we never had before, cost effectively, so we can actually do things. And now think about billions of people all over the world having access to those same tools, right? That's one of the things we've never had. I explained to people that today with my Substack, I reach more CEOs and CMOs than Ad Age or Adweek. And that's a form of obviously not AI technology, but simply a very simple, email content management system and payment system. I don't charge together. The ability for me to play around with the Runway ML, for the people who were the creatives who had little money but who could create everything everywhere all at once, was done using Runway ML. Runway is a video sort of prompt to video machine. So in effect, what I basically believe is it'll allow people to be much more creative because a lot of the processing stuff will be done. On the other hand, what some people thought was as creative will be in some sort of problem. So for instance, if you spend a lot of time rotoscoping, that can be done now in 6 seconds versus 48 hours.
Yep,
if you basically said, I want to be a graphic designer, yes, but now you have to be the next generation of graphic designer. But just like Adobe did not destroy graphic designers, it just said, if you're a graphic designer, this gives you more tools and more skills. But so I basically believe that every one of our jobs will change, but not that our jobs will disappear.
That's a great point. That's oh yeah, go ahead. So.
Oh, no, good to know, because I am in the creative profession.
We all are. We human beings are creative by our very nature because we make stories up all the time.
Well, adding to that point, right? I mean, we are changing the way we work, and you have an upcoming book, so maybe we get a sneak peek on rethinking work. Is there any advice you would offer to companies trying to define the work of the future, or what that means? What that level, what the shifts are?
Yes, there are 4 shifts basically, and I've already been talking to a lot of companies. One is a demographic shift. And so when you're senior management, like I used to be senior management, you tend to be more seasoned, which is a way of saying we tend to be older. I'm not saying all seasoned managers, but we don't tend to be as Gen Z, maybe in the tech industry, but otherwise we don't tend to be Gen Z, right? So one is a mindset shift. So when you look at Gen Z, only 24% of them believe in capitalism. 76% want to work for themselves. 66% have a side hustle and side gig when they have a full-time job. Right. So don't tell them to come back to the office because they actually got 2 other jobs, friends. Okay. So figure that one out. Okay. So that happens to be one. The other is that there are new marketplaces, whether they be marketplaces like a Shopify or marketplaces like an Amazon Web Services or at Etsy. There are lots of ways for us to be far more creative and to think about jobs differently. And then at the same time, there's obviously globalization and a whole bunch of other things. So basically what I say is the following. Number one is recognize that in the future, everybody is thinking about no longer how you can fit life into work, but everybody's trying to figure out how to fit work into life. Okay. And that is a mindset shift that people don't realize. It's no longer work-life balance where I try to fit life into work. The basic thing is, how do I fit work into my life? Okay. Which is number one. Number two is all of us, whether we like it or not. And by the way, I spent 37 years at a 100,000 person company, which I continue to admire and be involved with. So what I'm about to say is not anti-large company under any circumstance. But in order to be successful, you need to also know how to operate like a company of one. Okay. And what I mean by a company of one is you got to be plugging and playing, have a discrete set of cells, have a skills, have a very good API so you can work and collaborate well with other people, right? Continuously learn and keep yourself updated. Because even today, in the Publicis group, we have this platform called Marcel, which allows you to bring together different people in different projects. And that's the way it's been in Hollywood. That's the way it's been in consulting companies. But in order to do that, you have to be a company of one, which is you got to be well known. You got to continue to hone your skills. You continue to have good relationships with everybody. Now, I operated as a company of one when I was a company of 100,000. Now I operate as a company of one in a company of one. But the skill sets are the same. And so my whole basic belief is every individual should be responsible for their own career. Do not outsource it to HR.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so true. I tell that to people all the time. You're the boss of your own career.
You are the boss of your own career. I'm obviously a big fan of HR and talent who can help us be bosses of our career. But eventually, it is our own. It's us. We are the bosses.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such great advice. Well, we look forward to see your book. But I was reading an article that you written yesterday.
Yes.
And I love the article. And the title was "The 5 Keys to Ensure Professional Relevance." And in your article, you suggested that companies should develop a team that optimizes for the future with specific goals while focusing the rest of the organization on maximizing today with different sets of goals. I thought, I was reading that paragraph, Rishad, and I thought it was brilliant and fantastic advice. My question for you is, how do companies or departments balance both and do not sort of create an environment that separates the innovators from the doers?
The way to do it is in two ways. One is to have both groups be aware of each other and what each other's goals are and objectives. And their goals, objectives, and incentives and operating styles might be very different. I've done this 3 times inside of Publicis Group, where I started new units. And I reported up to the overall CEO, as did the CEOs of the big units report. But we both knew that their job was to keep themselves growing, keep themselves profitable. And mine was to create new skill sets that kept us credible and world-class against the new competitors, not our existing competitors. So everybody knew why we were behaving differently and what we were doing differently. It wasn't just because, we wanted to be different, which was number one. Number two is to allow people and encourage people to move from one to the other. So, hey, if you happen to be in what you consider to be today and you want to work in what might be tomorrow, welcome along. But importantly, to also recognize that eventually tomorrow and today would fuse. So when I launched a company called Starcom IP, it eventually fused into Starcom, right? Yeah. When I launched some of our digital units, it eventually fused into what became Digitas and Razorfish, and then obviously every other thing. So as long as people say, hey, I can be part of the future. I understand you're building this. I can be a part of the future. The reason you're doing this strange stuff is not because something's gone wrong with you, but because you have this goal. But in the end, you and I are working on the same team. Right. We just happen to be two different streams that will come together to make the Mississippi.
It's amazing. We're here with author, speaker, teacher, and advisor, Rishad Tobaccowala. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your insights and wisdom.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. This was a pleasure. Thank you.
Wow.
I know. Wow, it was a great conversation and different perspectives.
Yeah, I mean, we've actually seen many different points of view here, and I think it's really important for everyone as they get into their AI journey and their data journey to really consider not just the responsibility and the ethics, the need to balance different teams from right side, left side, right brain, left brain, to be able to get your thoughts and your ability to take data, spreadsheets, and a story, as someone put it, but also really thinking about what the business value is and aligning back with the business. This has definitely been a very interesting group of speakers and some wonderful insights. What do you think, Teresa?
Yeah, I mean, and the other part for me that I always really spoke to me is the ability also to think about people, putting people at the center. And that speaks to me a lot because I do believe that, because we forget, why are we doing what we do it? Why are we making these solutions? Why are we doing these things? At the end of the day, it's all about people. Being the customer, being the employee, being the citizen, being the client is always about people. And I do believe having that people-centric mindset, I do think, especially in the age of AI, it will serve all of us well and it'll serve society well.
Yeah, we definitely humanizing AI. This is episode number 3, Unleashing Human Potential in a Data-Driven AI World. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.